Now, this was without a doubt one of those perspective shifting episodes. Vicky lost the love of her life, her husband Sam, in 2019. And while she'll be the first to tell you that she thought she was just going to be riddled with all types of negative, sad emotions, it was almost the complete opposite of with that. Being able to spend those last couple of years with Sam and the memories, and even beforehand, before they knew of the cancer, before they knew how detrimental it was, she will say was certainly the time of her life. But that realization, that epiphany, if you will, that she had after his death is one to hear about. So much so that she wrote a book about it that she broke down into thirds, and you should definitely check that out. But with that, Vicky will be the first to tell you also that she does not like the cultural conditioning around death and how we just awfulize things time and time again. So keep an open mind, keep an open perspective, and without further ado, enjoy episode 211, The Helping Hand. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Down to Business podcast here with Tamar Turner. First and foremost, I got to give a big shout out to Vicky. One, just because, she still joined me, even with everything that she kind of has going on her end, and even with not necessarily feeling the best. But I'm sure today that's not going to alter any parts of the interview. She's still on here to be very impactful, be a resource. And she already has something that she wants to give away to y'all. We're going to wait till a little bit later because I know how much y'all love the freebies and stuff like that. But she already came on here in a giving and a cheerful mood. So I'm excited for that. But before we get into all things that Vicky has done, how you can tap in with her, where you can find her and everything like that, Vicky, I know I kind of gave a preface as to how you are doing today, but just for the viewers, for the audience, for everybody listening, how are you feeling today? How's everything on your end?
Well, I've been better. I got back from a huge trip recently. It was so exciting. It was in the Mediterranean.
Ooh, okay.
And I came back really with my body having been stressed from the heat and flight delays and all that. And, so I'm a little headachy and stuff. But I really am so excited about this interview that I think that's going to take precedence and make it all go away, at least temporarily.
I love that. I love that you were able to travel there and make it back safely, and hopefully you really did enjoy yourself. But yes, I could imagine with the extraneous nature of just the Mediterranean, of just traveling in general, even when you're going domestically, it can be a lot. It can be exhausting, and it can definitely take a toll on the body, sometimes later than what we realize. A lot of times I don't really necessarily feel all that until the next day, wishing that maybe I would have taken off work or taken some more time for myself. So I get you for that. But yeah, down in business, we're gonna up the ante a little bit. We're gonna push all that to the side. We're gonna have a great time. So before we get into all things, look, I know we're going to have some people tapping in from your side. We're going to have some people tapping in from our side, but we're also going to have some newcomers along the way. And I love newcomers just because in some form or fashion, they found out about us. They found out about the episode, about who you are, about who I am, and they wanted to tap in and find out some more. So to bring everybody up to speed, put everybody on the same page and playing field, can you just do two things for me? Can you, one, just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then two, tell us what brings you on the Down to Business podcast today?
Absolutely. So my name is Vicki Paris Goodman, and I wrote a book called To Sam with Love, a surviving spouse's story of inspired grief. So I was a mechanical engineer. I'm now retired. And I did some other things on the side. I played violin all my life. And in my new retirement town here in Arizona, I play in the Pops Symphony Orchestra. I learned since my husband passed away in 2019 that I can sing, and now I sing in public sometimes. It's been a real journey, I'll tell you, and we'll get into all of that. And I was also a theater reviewer on the side. While I was working as a mechanical engineer, I was a theater reviewer on weekends for over 20 years from a local paper in Long Beach, California. So that's where I attribute my ability to write a book from all the experience I have writing those theater reviews. So yeah, I really honed my writing skills that way. So what brings me onto your show, Tamar, is that after my husband Sam passed from cancer in 2019, and we had 2 years from diagnosis until his passing. So, that was a difficult 2 years, but not as difficult as you might think because he did so well for a year and a half of it. You couldn't even tell he was sick. That's how well he did on treatment. And so, we were very blessed in that respect. So after he passed in July of 2019, it's been, today is the 5th anniversary. I didn't even realize that. July 30th. So after he passed, I expected to be kind of lost for a while, even though I'm pretty much a survivor type. Sam was the love of my life, and I expected to grieve pretty hard, but it didn't happen that way. On the very day he passed, I was flooded with optimism. It was like a helping hand was coming from somewhere outside myself to guide me. It was so soon, just a few hours after he passed, that it was unseemly, and my first instinct was to push these blessings away. But I thought, I was so strong during our 2-year ordeal, and I took such good care of Sam at the end when he needed taken care of, that maybe if good things want to come my way, even on the day he passed, maybe I should let them. It turned out to be a wonderful decision, because the next 2 years of my life, up to the time I decided to write my book, To Sam with Love, were really inspired in terms of serendipitous events happening. I would get signs of things. I can talk about a couple of those. Opportunities started coming my way, like the chance to sing and finding out I could. And opportunities to travel to exotic places that maybe I couldn't have traveled to with Sam. I went to Antarctica. He didn't like cold weather vacations, so it was kind of a chance to make things up afterwards. But the main thing that happened, and the reason I'm here, is because I was blessed with insights at a pretty fast and furious pace, much more so than I think we all get moments of clarity in our lives, but they're not real frequent. It's like, maybe once a year, once every couple of years, a light goes on and you think, oh, wow. And it's almost life changing when that happens. Well, I was being blessed with those insights pretty frequently during that first 2 years after Sam passed. Um, what prompted all of this is, after he passed, I had access to the hospice chaplain. Sam was on hospice, and there was a chaplain from that hospice who was available to me about once a month for a whole year after he passed. And I started asking a lot of questions about the afterlife. Now, what's stunning about this story of mine is that I was raised in a very secular family. And even though I had begun to believe in a higher power, even while Sam was still alive, I hadn't taken that very far. It remained a very rudimentary belief at that point. But now that he was gone, and I wanted to know more about the afterlife and about God, and I needed increased faith, I started asking the hospice chaplain about the afterlife, and she recommended the story of a secular neurosurgeon who had had a massive brain infection, had been in a coma for 7 days, was being taken care of in the hospital by his colleagues, and who couldn't get the infection under control. But he had this near-death experience while he was in this 7-day coma, and it made him a believer. And the stunning part of his story is that it was so divinely inspired. He had no way of contracting this infection. He didn't have a wound of the necessary kind. And they couldn't get the infection under control, so there was no way he was going to survive this, especially with his brain intact. He would be a vegetable, according to his colleagues. And according to him, when he came back miraculously from all of this and looked at his charts, and he said, how in the world did I survive this? This was all about God. And remember, he was a secularist leading up to this story. So I read his story, and I connected with it to such a degree that it brought me the rest of the way to believing in God and an afterlife. So one of probably the most stunning of the insights with which I was blessed, and this came to me after I published the book, so it's included in some audio episodes that I will offer to you at the end here. But I'll give you a clue about it. I ask the question, is death really tragic? And the reason that came to me was because I thought, okay, if there's a loving God and a beautiful beyond words, exquisite afterlife, and if God has a plan for each one of us, and obviously that plan includes, in the case of a married couple, I mean, unless they both die in a plane crash or an auto accident or something, they're not going to die at the same time. In fact, I don't even use the word die. I say pass, because I don't believe the soul dies, only the body and the brain along with it. So so if so it's in God's plan in almost every case that one spouse is going to pass before another. And that means that God has a plan for the surviving spouse to learn more, to experience more, maybe even to teach others. And then they will join their spouse in the afterlife at some later date. So there's this cultural conditioning that tells us to awfulize death and loss and other adversity. Yet, if it's all in God's plan, we're meant to learn from these things. And those lessons are stunning. And if you don't buck them, if you don't avoid them, but if you actually remember that in everything bad that happens to you, whether it be a bad hair day to your house burning down or you losing the love of your life, there's a lesson in it. And we may as well learn the lesson, or God's going to keep trying to teach us that lesson. So these are the types of insights with which I was blessed. And one of the reasons, the main reason I want to get this message out there to the world, is because the cultural conditioning that tells us to awfulize these things, I believe, is so wrong. And people grieve so hard and so long, and there's so much guilt involved as well that prevents them from moving on, maybe when they otherwise would have begun that next chapter of life, which can be so exciting, earlier. But they say, oh, it feels like it's too soon. I feel guilty. I got to tell you, one of the things I inferred from reading the story of the neurosurgeon was, here I am having a senior moment because I'm not feeling well, so I'm forgetting what I was going to say. Well, anyway, I'll think of it later. But that should give you, in a nutshell, why I'm here. I want to help other people. Oh, I remember. So if all of these things that I've said are true, and I believe strongly that they are, then one of the things I inferred from all this was that souls in the afterlife do not experience negative emotions. They're surrounded by a love, according to the neurosurgeon, and many, many other near-death experiences. A love so powerful that we can't even imagine it here on earth. So if that's the case, souls in the afterlife are surrounded by this love, and they can't possibly experience negative emotions like anger and jealousy. They're perfected there. They're at one with God. They know everything. So these are snippets of the insights that have become a movement to get people to experience loss and other adversity in a much less terrible, painful way.
Whew. And that's, well, first and foremost, my condolences to that, as someone who, um, a lot of what you were saying just resonated with me, almost because I felt like I was kind of going on the journey too, and thinking about when I lost my mother back in 2011, and just thinking about the rate at which I felt like I bounced back from that, as someone who was a mama's boy, as someone who, it was something unexpected, as someone that was, just not you leave for school one way and thinking one thing, and then you come home and there's a totally different story to tell. So for me, it was just like, but I remember getting a call from my school, and one of the first things I wanted to do was just get back. My thoughts were just consuming me, and there was just a lot happening and going on that it was tough to just deal with that. And then I wasn't home. I was at my grandparents' house. So waking up somewhere that I was familiar with, but unfamiliar in the sense of this is not where I lived every day. So it was just one of those things, and just not having people around me, and just my mind is already racing a million thoughts a minute. So to really now have that event with it, and then having my little brother there and other family, it was just a lot. And so, whereas a lot of times I was just hearing a lot of people talk about grief and talk about time healing all, and just everything kind of being thrown at me as a 15-year-old sophomore, and it was just, I didn't really know what to do, where to go. All I knew was that I wanted to get back to school and play football, and that's all I was. I was just focused on just trying to take my mind off of things. And I think that was when I started to realize that my coping mechanisms weren't the best, and that whereas I'm not really the person to talk about emotions. I much rather kind of just hear what you have going on, give advice, speak to that, and go from there. And sometimes it can be kind of contradictory because I don't always practice what I preach just the same. But it was just kind of, I learned that through that isolation period, what I really needed, what I really didn't have, how I, lost the person who I confided in, who I told everything to, and who was just there for me. So a lot of times, whereas I knew I had a support system around me, I knew I had people who wanted to be there for me, I kind of shied away from that because it just wasn't what I was used to. And it was just hard to kind of crack open that shell that had just kind of formed now. So to hear everything that you're saying, just about, just the guilt, and just about how everything is processed at a different rate, and differently depending on, who it is in your life, that relationship that y'all had, how the loss came about. Some losses are unexpected. Some, as you said, you knew that things were not going the way that they were supposed to. But as you also said too, for a year and a half, you couldn't even tell that Sam was ill, or that something was wrong, or that he was kind of just living his life as if it was golden in a sense. So it's also just a lot of different factors and things that go into it, that now I'm starting to realize, even as the older me now, even as 13 years, 14 years later, just being able to see some of the things that I thought to be true, or that were I kind of just took as at face value, but not really having gone through that experience myself, and not really having sat down, had those conversations. My faith strengthened, but it weakened first. And it was very tough for that. There was a lot of doubts, there were a lot of questions, there were just a lot of confusion and misunderstanding, that if I really, if I'm true to the person who I am, if I'm true to my faith, if I'm true to how I was raised, then I can bounce back from this, or I can just recognize that some things may not come with an explanation per se, or some things may not always make sense to me. And that was just me kind of wanting to be in control. So to hear a lot of what you're saying, and to really just hear those emotions, to hear what you were going through, what you were thinking, like, that was just, that's just amazing. I love that transparency too. And I want to share this message from DeAndre just the same, but I want to also kind of piggyback that message to you, just because transparency is not the easiest thing to do. It's not easy to make yourself vulnerable. It's not easy to kind of talk about those moments that weren't the happiest, those days that weren't the brightest per se. But I am a firm believer in that, with every storm, there's a rainbow that comes after. Even yesterday, I had an interview here, and I was just so mad. I was looking at the clock, and my meeting just kept running later and later and later. And I was like, I know it's about to rain. Like, I live in Florida. It feels like it can be sunny here 1 minute, and then 8 minutes later, it'll just look like the craziest thing happened. And so I'm just looking like, wow, I'm going to have to drive home in this rainstorm. And sure enough, as soon as I got everything packed up and went outside, there was a big rainbow in the sky. So, I'm a firm believer in that, with tough times don't last, tough people do. So I have to really just commend that, because that's a lot. And then it's why I like this message so much, is just because not only have you realized what you've gone through, what you've learned from it, your even your self-reflection and that introspection that you had, but you now then want to get that message and spread that out to others. And I think that is solely the most important thing, because it's so many times we can learn these things, or we can exhibit and inhibit these skills, and just have these things and these resources around us, and we just kind of keep it to us. And I'm not necessarily saying that it's a bad thing. It's not necessarily saying, I take the term gatekeeping with a grain of salt, because it just depends. But I am a firm supporter and just firm believer in, whenever you want to push that onto others, whenever you want to be a resource and be a light to others, it's the biggest blessing in the world. So it's just amazing to see everything that you're doing. It's amazing to see that, your traumatic event that you had to go through, and everything that you thought, and how you felt, you just had that adversity and that resilience already built in you. So to now translate that to others, and to now put it in a book, and to now have these insights and these introspections, man, it's amazing. I'm very excited to really hear that audio, because even along the lines and along the track that you were going, I'm like, okay, I'm liking this. It's coming together. It's making sense. So I appreciate you for that. So now, something that I think about with, as you spoke about your background from the theater reviewer to mechanical engineer, and it seems like you did a little bit of everything out there. Now, with reviewing the theater and with everything that you were doing in that regard, was a book, how did the book kind of come about? I know that you were used to just writing, and I know that it was something that kind of came to you, but theater reviewing and writing a book, those are two different things. Some people are published authors and have probably never reviewed a piece of theater or literature in that regard, and some people are probably A1 and expert theater reviewers, but probably would never write a book. So how did that really develop? Was it partially the experience too of losing Sam, everything that you had to go through with that you just felt like there was a lot of just thoughts and things that you wanted to put out there? What really sparked the foundation for that process?
Yeah, well, as I said before, all of what I experienced during the 2 years after Sam passed was unexpected. And, I'd love to believe, it all came from within me. You talk about it being introspection, and I am pretty self aware, but I don't for 1 minute believe that these insights came from within me. I believe strongly that that helping hand, which I now knew was God, was employing me in a sense, was giving me a new purpose in life. Not only is it stunning that I was raised secular and wound up here, but it's also true. And unlike you, I've always been an open book. I'm kind of self-deprecating. I'm certainly far from perfect, and so I like to make fun of my own personality flaws, like my impatience, for example. And one of the things that I have to admit was true of me is that I've never been the helping type. I've always kind of marveled at people who volunteer in the community to just kind of perform selfless acts for others. And I've never been able to relate to that. Call it self involvement. I don't know what it is in me, but I've just never really been able to relate to that strongly. Well, I think now with this movement and this message, because I'm retired, I don't have to be doing this. It's almost become a full-time job tomorrow. But I feel so strongly that it can help others. Wow, help others. I finally found a way to do it that I'm comfortable with, that I feel is aligned with me and who I am. And so it's a blessing. It's a gift from God that I now have such a purpose. So I don't have to feel anymore the way I felt most of my life, like I'm kind of selfish and just not the helping type. And so here I am getting this message out there. And I wrote the book because after 2 years of the insights and revelations and opportunities that I felt motivated to embrace, I really thought the story could help others. And now I believe that more than ever. And the reason I did the audio episodes, which we'll talk about later, is because, as I said, some of the best insights came to me after I published the book. And I thought, oh no, what do I do with these? Well, I created this private podcast audio series so that that could get out there too. And I think the two combined really sum up all of what this movement has to offer. You know, I think that people buy into this cultural conditioning to awfulize death to such an extent that what I've noticed is when I talk to one of my Christian friends, for example, someone who, without a doubt has a strong faith in God, and I tell them about, the insight I had about, why does death have to be tragic? And they nod knowingly. Yet these are the same people who if they lose someone, they grieve hard. Or if someone they know loses someone, they they're so sad for them and they say, I'm so sorry for your loss. And what I'm trying to do with this movement and this message is to undo the cultural conditioning so that we begin to connect the dots as to the reality of losing someone and tying it together with the fact that they're going to this wonderful, exquisite place to be with God, and that we will join them there later, and that we have more work to do until we join them. What is awful about any of that? You know, you can even consider that maybe passing sooner than later is a good thing, is a gift from God. If it takes you to a place that's so stunning and wonderful, and I have no doubt that it is, because you can read countless near-death experiences, and they have a lot in common. And they have some things that are different too. And from the neurosurgeon's story, I have some ideas as to why they differ, but that's kind of a side note. So, I at this point, I strongly believe we need not awfulize these occurrences in life. We need not grieve so hard. We can move into the next chapter of life with excitement and enthusiasm, while knowing that our loved one's soul is still around and we will join them there later. I think it's all good news.
I even think about too the connotation about funerals that has kind of changed for me over the years. Growing up, it was more so a thing of like, that was a funeral. It was very sad. It was very just melancholy. It was very just, yeah, mood dampening in a sense. But nowadays, it's really like we even call them like homecomings or homegoing celebrations, or like you're being called back home, or you're being called where you truly belong. And as you said too, I like the point that you made about sooner than later. Sometimes we always say like the good die young, or gone too soon, or everything like that. And it's important to think about that, because like you said, there could be a thing of that there's still more work left to be done, or we're still here for a reason, because there's a purpose that we're not understanding, or we're not, there have been near life or death experiences where two people have been in the same situation, but only one person passed as a result of that, or vice versa, or the person to kind of now tell the story or still be alive to speak about it may be misunderstood, or may be confused as to how, like, why didn't I go with that person? And oftentimes we don't think about it from the bigger picture, or from a deeper meaning, or from a deeper message. And I feel like the when we start to, because as you spoke to too, sometimes it's not always that introspection or that self-reflection. Sometimes it comes from around us, and sometimes we are being sent so many signs, so many signals. There are things around us, blessings, everything, that sometimes it can be second nature and you not even realize it. It could be inadvertent that you're missing it, and sometimes it can be smack dab in your face, and you
Right.
may not be receiving, or you may not have stepped into it, or you really may not even be there to be able to receive. You may not be there spiritually, you may not be there mentally, you may not be there physically to be able to get that, because God is never going to put something on you that you're not ready for, or God is never going to put you into a situation that you can't step in to receive. And I think we also too have to think about what we're praying for, what we're being intentional about, what we're manifesting, what we're thinking about too, because oftentimes we pray for these things, or we speak on these things, or we want these things, and we're on the way to get it, or we can get it, or we can obtain it in some way, and we may miss it. We may block a blessing, as people say, or things along that line. So something that I think about with what it is that you do, and really the conceptualization of death, as we said, how we awfulize it, and how it's just, it always just comes with the sadness, the madness, the confusion, and everything like that. For what you do, for the message that you're getting out there, have you found it have you found it to be difficult with with the stereotype, and with the what I guess the umbrella is around death? Because for me, as I said, growing up, it's always taught as something bad. It's always taught as something that you don't want to do. You don't want to go there. Cemeteries, graveyards, funerals, caskets, everything like that. It's never anything positive around that. So for the message that you're trying to get out there, even too from a spiritual perspective, do you find that people have a hard time receiving it? Do you find that it's combated more so just because of the mindset and what's been ingrained in us as we've kind of grown up and what we've learned?
Absolutely. One of the things I say in one of the audio episodes is that we don't talk about death. In fact, I think I start out the first one. Uh, we don't talk about death in our culture. And especially young people, they don't see a reason to talk about it or think about it. And that's understandable. But given the emotion behind it and this cultural conditioning, I think we need to talk about it. And we need to see it in a whole new light. That's my message. I want to go back to something you said, about that common saying that only the good die young. And I hadn't thought of that before. And I'm glad you said it because it really does kind of go along with this idea that maybe death is even a good thing. In other words, maybe we believe that the good die young. Maybe that's not just sort of a false perception. Maybe it really tends to happen that way. And maybe it's because God is rewarding those who are good with an earlier transfer to be with Him. Life on earth is hard. We work hard, we go through a lot. I don't know anyone who hasn't suffered of adversity. And sometimes it's very painful, and sometimes it lasts a long time. And sometimes these lessons are very hard learned. And that's life, on this earth. And I won't say that I want to pass to the afterlife today if I could choose to, because, I still have things I want to do while I'm here. But one thing about my newfound belief in God and an afterlife is that I no longer fear death. And I know a lot of people who have strong faith say the same thing, that they don't fear death. They don't necessarily want to go anytime soon, but they don't fear it because they know where they're going. And so all of these things are really grist for the mill, food for thought, a couple of cliches I threw out there. But we should be thinking about these things in another way. And the cultural conditioning to awfulize them is so strong. So, yes, I'm having a little bit of trouble getting the message out there in a way that satisfies me, that convinces me that people are really getting it. Am I a good writer? Yes. Am I a decent communicator? Yes. But the cultural conditioning is strong. And people don't like to talk about death, they don't like to think about it. And all of these things come together to put sort of a wall in front of my efforts here. But look at me. I've been on this mission of doing podcast interviews for over 6 months now, and I'm still going strong because I want to give it my all until I can't do anymore. And I love having that commitment, a commitment to help others if I possibly can.
That's a strong commitment, and it's not the easy. It's definitely a easier said than done type of thing, and to stay consistent with it, I think that's the big thing too. Because oftentimes as your impact grows, so does the yearn for it, or so does the, in a sense, sometimes even demand for it. When people know that you're changing lives, when people get testimonials about that, when people get maybe word of mouth or a friend of a friend or anything like that, then they want that. And it almost too, in a sense, becomes a responsibility. And as you said, even with being retired, this feels like a job at some point. You have a duty, in a sense, a duty to serve and to help and to impact. And it goes beyond just now what you kind of started in the foundation that you built. It's a bigger picture because there are probably people who you'll never meet, you'll never physically talk to, that have been impacted by your work, have been impacted by your messages, have been impacted by what you're doing and what you're putting out there. And I think that really just goes to show how transcending things can be. But when it's something that you really want to do, when you derive the joy and the happiness, and even as I even hear the peace from it that you do, because this is not something that is stressing you out. This is not something that you're ready to rip your hair out about. This is not something that you're just ready to throw it all up and just give up. It's a place of peace. I see you smile, and I see, even with you being under the weather and may not have necessarily felt 110% today, you got on here and instantly the aura just changed, and I love to see that. But I'm also very, it warms my heart to know that there were people that were impacted too as a result of this. And there are people that are still being impacted. And there are people that, may have felt like there was no way out, may have felt like they had nobody to turn to or nobody who could resonate, or maybe they felt like their feelings weren't validated, or maybe they did feel that guilt. They did, and guilt and grief mixed together, man, that's a deadly combination, and especially with sometimes, as I said, the nature of the loss, who it is, who that relationship with that person, a spouse, a parent, a sibling, pets, anything, it all hits very differently. And at times, whereas we process, I tell people all the time, you take all the time you need to heal. I was a big believer back then when I kept being told time heals all, that okay, one day I'm just going to wake up and I'm going to be okay, like I'm just going to be good, this is going to be maybe water under the bridge. But then I realized, hey, that's my mom, like this could never just be an afterthought or just something that I just go by the wayside. But have things gotten more manageable? Absolutely. Do I now feel 13 years later that I'm in a better space, in a better place? Absolutely. Back then, if I think about the back then, my mindset then and what I wanted to do and how it was just always on my mind and everything, and some of the first holidays and celebrations, it was a lot with that. But to now, have been able to resonate with people, have been able to even talk to other people about their loss and be there for them and have that impact, that helps you too. I didn't really realize sometimes the conversations that I needed just from helping others, the advice, and even in talking to God and the prayer and just everything like that, it was touching me too. And that's another reason why I speak to these signs and sometimes these people or these blessings that are around you that are being bestowed upon you, and they're not necessarily you because of you. I was getting blessings and I was getting, prayer through others. And I was getting, whereas I'm thinking I'm giving you advice, when I really took a step back, I'm like, oh, that can apply to me too. Or I can, I needed to hear that same, just the same. So it's amazing to see that. Okay. So with, as we think about, there are going to be people who are coming along this journey now with us, meeting you pretty much at the podcast part, meeting you after the book, after the audios, after the insights and everything like that. Do you feel like as we continue to move forward, even as we think about the rest of this year, the rest of your impactful career, the rest of what you're really looking to do, is there anything next per se on the journey? Is there anything that you kind of want to do? And obviously, we don't want to spoil any surprises or debut anything that hasn't been uncovered yet or unseen. So definitely don't do that. But I always like to give my followers just kind of some insight or some, even sometimes the eager approach, because as I said, there are going to be people coming from the down to business side. There are going to be people coming from the Vicki Paris Goodman side, but there are going to be people who know neither one of us or anything, but are here for the journey. Now, you may have even touched something with them. They may even be dealing with a loss of their own. So is there anything that as we continue to dive, as we continue to move forward, that you're looking to do, that you're looking to kind of get into or debut?
Well, I do have another book in the works, but it's on a completely different topic. I have to say that, as insights come to me, I've found things to do with them, like the audio episodes that came to me after I published the book. So, no, I think I'm kind of caught up for the time being. But I would like to tell you a little about my book because the assumption is that it's a tough book to read because it's sad. It's not. Everyone who I know who's read it has said, oh my God, it was even funny in places and it's so uplifting and positive. And the middle third of it is devoted to um, Sam's diagnosis, treatment, and eventual passing. So I guess that's the most sober part of the book. But even that is not depressing because I talk so much about the wonderful things we did while he was sick, but not really manifesting symptoms, and he was able to continue, his life, and some interesting things that happened with his treatment and some traveling we did. And I just put it all together in such a way that there is no part of this book that is depressing at all. And there are some really funny parts because, as I said, I tend to be self-deprecating when I talk about my own life. And one of the things I did with the first third of the book is I decided to devote that to to telling the reader about Sam's life and a little of my own and our time together Well, Sam was a near perfect person. He wasn't perfect, but he was near perfect. He was one of those philosophically and morally very disciplined people. And here I am, making these mistakes with my impatience and, other personality flaws. And, I decided to turn them into funny stories. But the whole purpose behind that first third of the book, as entertaining as it is, and I've been told it's wildly entertaining, a page turner, in fact, the whole book, which was very gratifying. But the whole purpose behind that first third was to let people know who we are, and especially who Sam was, so that when he passes toward the end of the second third of the book, it would have the most impact. And then the latter third of the book is all the inspired things that happened for me unexpectedly after Sam passed. And, you know, when you take it as a whole, it's there are lessons to be learned. And I think anyone, whether they're facing a loss or not, um, I think these lessons apply to any adversity in life, and we all suffer adversity, as we said before. I mean, there's nobody who avoids it. So I think the book is really universally applicable. It's entertaining. I've been told by many people that it was a page turner. They couldn't put it down. Imagine how gratifying that was. And so, I'm just really happy to be putting it out there.
And for those interested, where can we find the book?
Oh, okay. So the book is discounted. This is the best pricing currently available for it, is at my domain inspiredgrief.com/book. And there it is discounted. So go there to buy the book. And the audio episodes, which are about 12 to 15 minutes each, there are three of them, and they're not very so they're short. Takes all of 45 minutes to listen to all three of them, but they're full of kind of an expanded view of some of the insights that we've talked about in this interview, Tamar. And I would really encourage you to go and subscribe to that audio series. It's free of charge. All you have to do is go to inspiredgrief.com, put in your first name and email address, and you'll get the audio episodes. Do it now so you don't forget. You will love them. So that's that. And I also have a website, vickiparisgoodman.com, where I have some blog articles that are also insightful and entertaining. So, that's it. And then my next book, I'll just tell you a little bit about it. It's called Speed Bumps and Other Impediments to Life in the Fast Lane. It's about the trials and tribulations of life as a type A personality. And what I really like about it is, I love making fun of myself. So it's pretty self-deprecating in parts, just to give you an idea. What my favorite chapter so far is called Road Rage 101. It's pretty funny. And so, I'm having fun with that one. But what I like about it, and I'm hoping to get it published pretty soon, I still have yet to finish it. What I really like about it is that I think it's great for other type A's to kind of read about themselves and know they're not alone. And I really think it's great for type B personalities who have type A's in their lives, because type Bs do not understand type A's. And they just do not see why they're so wrought up, so impatient, so driven. People think I'm from New York City, but I was born in Los Angeles and lived there the first 61 years of my life. But I was never comfortable there because people from Los Angeles are really laid back. And everybody would always tell me, Vicki, chill out. I felt like I wanted to deck them. I mean, I don't want to chill out. Gosh, Recognize a sense of urgency, for God's sake. Okay, so, that's kind of me. So everybody thought I was from New York, and my dad and Sam were both from New York, actually. So I get along with New Yorkers. But yeah, so the book is going to be a lot of fun, and I can't wait to publish it.
I love that, and maybe that's why this was so effortless today. I was born in the Bronx, so raised in Philadelphia. So yeah, so I'm pretty familiar with the northern where it comes from. Despite being in Tampa now, I definitely do. I have heard that connotation about LA. I've never been to Cali, but just in my family members and just in knowing the people out there and just what you see and what you hear, I believe it 100%. And that's just the East and the West Coast; those are two different sides of life. But I love that play on words with the book, and I'm very excited to see that come to fruition and come to life. So
Yeah.
we'll definitely have to do a follow up too when that time comes. Now, before we close out, before I have you kind of do what you did again, so I always like to end the episodes with the call to action. The call to action for me is always letting people know where they can find you. So I'm going to have you do that once more, just so that they can't say we didn't give it to them from the website and everything like that. But before we do that, do you feel like there is anything that we have not touched on today that you want to leave the people with? Any last words for people out there dealing with their own form and fashion when it comes to life? Any aspiring authors, any business owners, entrepreneurs, anybody, just as we said, just going through life, type A, type B, anybody of the sort, anything that you want to add?
I do have some tips for people. Remember when you said that when you lost your mom, I think it was, you said 13 years ago, and you just, kind of buried yourself in your football, and you said, you acknowledged that that probably wasn't the best way to handle things. Well, when you lose someone, people will tell you, just keep yourself as busy as possible so you don't have time to think or feel. I knew instinctively that that was, however well intended that advice was, that it was bad advice. I just knew it instinctively. What I did instead was I created a balance between all these new fun things I was doing, the singing. I went back and rejoined the orchestra I'd played in until we got Sam's diagnosis. I started traveling to exotic places, whatever I could think of to do that just felt right. And, but I didn't keep myself so busy that I had no time to think or feel. I made sure that I balanced it with alone time, whether that was just, I don't know, taking a walk, a hike, sitting and thinking, reading a book, just basic quiet time. Because even though I now know that you don't need to grieve so hard for someone having passed before you, because they're still around and there's so much good news surrounding this, the real grief, I believe, should be devoted to what's happened to your life. I mean, if you lose the person you were living with, the love of your life, your spouse, for example, life is going to undergo big changes. Is it? And as human beings, we are, uh, we kind of fear the unknown and uncertainty, and that requires processing. So the alone time or the quiet time should be spent processing that, because there's no getting around it. And that balance between activity, exciting new things, and the processing of what had happened to my life when Sam passed, it really served to allow me to move forward pretty happily, even from the start. I mean, was I in shock? Yes. But the balance really was the path forward for me. And it worked so well until COVID came a few months later. And suddenly I was spending way too much time alone. And I suffered during the next year 3 10-day depressions, which were so severe. I mean, I've never suffered a depression, but I knew that the anxiety over COVID, all of that time spent by myself, was just too much for me to endure just a few months after losing Sam. So there were these, precisely 10 days, each of them. It's kind of weird. And I would just sit in my living room looking out the window, for 10 days, and then it would kind of pass. And so the balance that I had achieved between activity and quiet time really was put to the test then. So I knew it worked, and it was kind of a long-winded tip, but I really strongly suggest that people establish that balance. It's okay to start doing fun things as early as you feel you want to. Souls in the afterlife are not angry or jealous, and there's no reason to experience any guilt. And the other things I would suggest is for people to be open to guidance. If it was available to me, it must surely be available to others. Be open to it and let yourself be led. I'm a control freak among control freaks, but somehow, and again, this was the helping hand at work, I let myself be led, and it was the best thing I could have done. And be open to opportunities that come your way. It's never too soon. If you feel like trying something new, do it. So those are my tips for people facing these adverse circumstances.
Well said, most definitely, and even things that I could take in my own, but also too just in that self reflection and wanting to be more self aware as I've grown up, things that I've just learned, and those, it's not always the easiest thing to come to terms with and to realize and to call yourself out about. But in the end, similar to you, I don't mind talking about myself, or I recognize that I'm not perfect, or I always kind of joke when people say don't judge me, and I'm just like, for me to judge you, it would make the assumption that I'm perfect, and Lord knows I'm pretty far from that. So no, really really just to hear about everything, really just to read your bio is one thing, to go to the website is another thing, but to really sit down and chat with you virtually is a totally different experience, and I'm really just grateful for it. One, just because it was a conversation that I didn't know that I needed to hear and to have myself. So I just thank you for that, and I appreciate that, and I am glad that we continued with the interview for sure, and I'm definitely excited to get this one out to everyone else. But no, I'm also just very excited, obviously, to know that the impact is still happening, that behind the scenes you're always working, you're always thinking, and you're always moving and grooving, but you're living life unapologetically and as you absolutely should be. So I love to hear that. Now, before we end, I know we kind of shared it a little bit ago, but I just want to make sure that we're clear and concise and nobody makes any excuses as to why they couldn't find you or see the website or get the audios or anything like that. When it comes to tapping in with you, when it comes to trying to find you, go to the website, the book, and everything like that, can you just give us everything you got, best places to reach you across the board?
Yes. Okay. So the website where you'll find some great blog articles is VickiParisGoodman.com. Vicki, Vicki, Paris, like the city in France, Goodman.com. And then discounted book, the best pricing available currently for To Sam with Love, a surviving spouse's story of inspired grief. Really uplifting read. That's at inspiredgrief.com/book. And finally, subscribe to the audio episodes. Do it now so you don't forget. They're free. That's inspiredgrief.com.
Amazing. Well, Vicki, thank you so much for everything. As we said, from the down to business side, from my side, we're here to support. We're here to follow along the journey. We're here for the publishing, the debut of Speed Bumps. When that happens, I'm very excited for that one. As somebody who had to shake off some northern road rage myself when I got down here, so I could probably use that chapter myself. But no, it's just, as I spoke to, it's really just amazing just to hear everything, hear the impact, hear how you get up every day, and just your mantra to serve, mantra to help, mantra to just be there, be a resource, but also to who you are, to see the faith that was tested, to see the faith that strengthened as a result, and to really see it now being put into work day in and day out. So I thank you so much for taking this time with me. I really do encourage everybody, whether you join live, whether you're listening to this at a later date, to just tap in, to be encouraged, to know that, you're not alone. Everybody is dealing with something in some capacity, and you never know what could really help you or what could really resonate with you. And as we said, it's okay to have to sit down and to deal with things. It's okay to take those moments for yourself. It's okay to have that self-reflection, but it's also important to be aware of what's around you, to be aware a lot of times of our surroundings and who we have in our life, of the conversations that we're having. Are we seeing things? Are we thinking about things? What we're praying for and what we're manifesting? I think all of that goes into it just the same. But to everybody, man, who continuously joins, who continuously taps in, from the messages, from the Facebook Live to the LinkedIn Live to the YouTube Live, we've been experimenting with some things, and it's been so positive so far. I thank y'all. I love y'all. This has been another episode of the Down to Business podcast here with Tamar Turner.